Hello, folks. It's Barry Chamish. Boy, that first half hour was draining on me, but we've got Janet Phelan, who knows something about my experience last week when this show, not me only, my guest, we were all cut off. And I believe that it was subterfuge. All right, Janet, are you there?
Yes, I am, Barry, and good afternoon to you.
Oh, good afternoon to you as well. Look, we'll start with Edward Snowden's revelations that the U.S. has launched massive spying programs and was scrutinizing the communications of American citizens in extreme and intense manners. Let's start with that. And I'm a
Right.
victim of that. I want you to know.
Well, I think given what might have happened with your show last week, it could possibly have been some sort of subterfuge or sabotage.
Both
May,
of us? Both of us cut off?
yeah, could have been.
All right, unless there's a massive coincidence of telecommunications history, both calls were cut off. And I won't even ask why. Okay, I had to wing it. Look, you're denying, well, Obama's denying. He says that the FISA court, now you have to explain this. My poor listeners don't know what a FISA court is. Uh, they're ensuring our executive privileges and we're not being monitored and interfered with. Now, let's go through this. What is the FISA court that Obama cites proving that there is no telecommunications interference?
Well, that's not exactly what Obama is saying. What
No, no,
he
no.
what
That's
he's
what Obama is saying.
what he's attempting to say is that
Okay.
it's all legal and lawful because the FISA court, which is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, is actually adjudicating and approving certain warrants so that certain people can be listened in on. But he's trying to assure us that really it's all quite legal. But there's a problem.
Yeah.
Uh, but there's a problem not only um, with Obama's protestations, but apparently when Snowden the revelations kind of hit the world concerning all these different spying programs. Names just kind of go on and on. Apparently, he may have missed one of the most critical spying programs. And
All right. Missed. He didn't know. Missed.
apparently may have. According
Okay.
to my source for this was John Loftus, who wrote a number of books on intelligence histories,
We'll
including.
get to him shortly. I
Right.
met him. I admired him briefly during the 80s for exposing the secret war against the Jews.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, there's a very interesting section in that book talking about a fundamental spying program, which I do believe was missed by Edward Snowden. And this has to do with a reciprocal agreement between Great Britain and the U.S. And according to this agreement, um, London has intelligence officers stationed at a listening post in the U.S., and they are indeed listening to our calls.
where's the
Uh,
post?
I believe it's at NSA headquarters,
NSA is National Security,
Security Agency, right?
right?
So, according to this information, it is Great Britain who's listening to our calls. Because Obama says, "Oh, we're not listening to your calls; we're collecting metadata." But according to what I understand from Mr. Loftus, Great Britain's listening to the calls and then, shoving the CDs across the desk to the NSA. So the FISA court itself only, or the FISA law rather, which was passed, I believe, in 78, only governs the actions of U.S. officials. It doesn't govern the actions of British officials.
Well, how much equipment does this take? I mean, you're talking about an entire telecommunications network. What does it involve?
Oh, well, this is not something that I actually know.
Okay, fair
I'm
enough.
Sorry. There's a lot of very high-tech stuff going on here. But
Great Britain is eavesdropping.
It's Great Britain who's eavesdropping, and apparently the U.S. also has a listening post over at their intelligence headquarters in Great Britain. So the U.S. listens so that Great Britain can say, we're not listening to your phone calls, but they forget to tell us it's the U.S.
Can you imagine the social events that take place at these places? They talk about what they picked up from each other over the telecommunications networks and joke about it or something.
Well, I know some funny stories about this. There is a rather, shall we say, brave and wonderful lawyer out in the Chicago area named Ken Kautsky, who's been trying to controvert all kinds of nasty stuff the government's been doing. And he has this very funny story about how he learned that his phone was tapped, and years later, apparently there was some sort of ongoing drama in the family, like a daughter was doing this and that and breaking up with a boyfriend, and Ken, suspected his phone was tapped. And years later, he runs into some FBI agent and goes, "Hey, whatever happened with that teenage romance going on in your family?" They all knew about it, okay?
I would guess that. What a world they live in.
Really? Talk about voyeurs. One wonders if they have lives of their own or if they just feed off ours, huh?
Well, you're talking about a lot of listening and a lot of reading.
And I'm sure that there are persons that they're more interested in than others, and there are persons that they're paying more attention to than others. I don't imagine that.
Nonetheless.
Well, still. So when Obama tells us that we're not listening to your phone calls, well, he is in a sense fudging.
Technically right.
Technically right, but like missing the mark. So, what he is doing is attempting to persuade us not to pay attention to, Big Brother who's snooping at the keyhole, when the snooping at the keyhole is absolutely...
Now, if I were Obama, I'd say we're looking for terrorists.
Well, he does
say that. I'd find some justification for this.
He does say that.
Oh, he does?
Yeah, well, he does say that, yeah. But then, there was this big scandal a couple years ago when it was found that they had tapped the phones of AP reporters, reporters as terrorists. It begins to blur the lines of it becomes quite Kafkaesque, right? So you're looking for terrorists, but you're really focusing on journalists. Like, this raises a lot of concern.
Well, I'd say Snowden probably has a decent life in Russia, and he's not going to ever see America again. Neither here nor there without diving into that. Look, Loftus, by the way, I was highly impressed by him and went to see him and went to meet him, and I was less impressed after that. I won't dive into why. All right, now Loftus...
I want to say something about Loftus. I think that book that he wrote, The Secret War Against the Jews, is one of the most magnificently researched and documented books that, gives us an entirely different window into what the United States is really doing than what our mainstream media tells
And
us.
then
Now,
you hear him speak, and then you meet him, and it's a bit of a letdown.
well, I will say that I'm very grateful that that book was written, and for those who have not read it, it was published in the 90s. I really encourage you to, because this book provides an entirely different perception of,
Not from my
of
point of view.
well,
All
from
right.
most
Don't
people have
tell me I'm a
no idea.
conspiracy writer.
Well, possibly Loftus was too. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. We were working about the same time during the same period of rising peace, and oh, we were stabbed in the back, and he pointed out where we were stabbed. Um, but again, all right, back we go. You claim that he saw a memo. You spoke to him about this
Yes, I spoke
from
with him.
the
Like maybe
Department of
yes,
Justice would
recently.
insert the words by the NSA into the FISA law. Uh, that's complicated. Can you explain it?
Right. So to make sure that the Great Britain listening post at the NSA was left out of any legal sort of implications, right? To make sure of that, according to Loftus, there was a memo that was issued by the United States Department of Justice suggesting an amendment to the FISA law, which was at that point, under consideration, and to put in the words by the NSA, which would make it look, like, of course, the NSA can't do this, but hey, Great Britain is, but we're not going to tell you that. So that particular amendment was meant to secure the legal protection for the
Did they
Great
get
Britain.
it
Yeah,
into
they got
law?
it. They got it into law. Yeah,
It didn't become part of the law, right?
it did become part of the law.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
All right, folks. There's a loophole in the FISA law that lets anyone but the NSA from outside the United States uh, free reign over your telecommunications.
I have sort of a funny story. I grew up, as you know, Barry, in a home where my father was an investigative reporter and was working on national issues. Dad was at one point a investigative reporter with the Saturday Evening Post, and growing up, the phone made an awful lot of noise. There was like a lot of clicking and whirring and so forth, and we figured the phone was tapped, and it became a big joke. So I'd pick up the phone, and it'd be one of my little girlfriends, and we'd be talking, and then click whir, and I go, hey, J. Edgar, you listening? Hey, J. Edgar, you still wearing that dress? I mean, I thought it was just hilarious, right? That our phone calls were being, I mean, my silly little phone calls with my girlfriends. But as it turned out, of course, there's nothing funny about the government breathing over your shoulder. So as it turned out, it was not such a big joke after all, although as a child I thought it was hilarious.
Well, I'm going to tell you that I'm hoping you got this straight from him, but you're quoting Loftus saying that a major operation, PRISM, was, Google, Facebook, I mean, everything that you
Mm-hmm.
communicate on via computer
Mm-hmm.
was bugged.
According to Snowden, um, through Prism, the internet connections are bugged. Um, and as we discussed earlier, Obama responds to this by saying, "Oh, we're just collecting metadata. Don't worry about it." But no one seems to be discussing that listening post.
What's metadata?
Metadata is like, for example, let's say you make a phone call to someone. Um, the metadata will be what time the phone call was made, how long the phone call took place, who to whom the phone call was made, but not the content.
All
What
right.
Obama
That's, I mean, what's the difference between that? Oh, content. In other words, the time of the letter would be recorded, but the actual letter wouldn't be.
according to Obama, without this special FISA court warrant, it's just all metadata. But the issue is now with these disclosures of this British listening post at the NSA, all this verbiage about, well, FISAs, and their powers to issue warrants and so forth, it becomes actually diversionary, because if they're going to if Great Britain's going to listen and pass the CDs, across the desk to the NSA, then the FISA court becomes actually sort of a charade.
In short, let's summarize this. In short, because a separate country, Great Britain, is doing the listening, you're not liable.
Right.
Oh, great. All right. Great to know this. Now, I want to switch. This one's complicated. The is in short, it's PCLOB, the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board. What is that? And afterwards, what did they discover that was significant? First of all, what is it?
Oh my gosh. Let's see. That was quoted in the article. Um, you know something? I'm going to have to very quickly check this out, because
No, don't.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't
If
know
it's
if
not
this is.
ad lib, don't do it.
I don't know if this is a government agency or an NGO oversight board, but I will say that it has been cited as producing a report that has the most detailed description of the PRISM program, and once again, is talking about sort of a mitigated kind of collection, only on certain email addresses or so forth. All of these.
Who's mitigating the collection?
According to the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board, according to them, the mitigation and safety net is being provided by the government. But once again, all of this hoopla about FISA courts, PRISM's only collecting metadata and so forth, all of this is a whole load of hooey when you realize that the Great Britain maintains that listening post. So it's just a bunch of what did they say? Sturm und Drang, right? A lot of diversionary verbiage to make us feel safer when we're really being surveilled to the teeth.
Well, you're very technical. I'm not sure what a Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 2014 is, and I'll bet you not many people out there know what it is, but you're saying is significant. In short, when you go on your computer, you could be listened to.
Well, you can be listened. Actually, according to Snowden's revelations, and actually further, even more recent revelations, there is malware. There is, shall we say, a spyware that can be downloaded onto your computer without your knowledge, that will allow the computer to pick up audio. So if you're walking around the house and you got your computer on, the computer can be listening to you too.
I'm going to repeat. Last week, my show, after a 2-week hiatus because of holidays, was disturbed from my side and from the guest side. It was a remarkable, all right, call it coincidence. It was ruined. My paranoid self says it was not an accident that my show was disrupted. There, I said it.
Well, I think that it's reasonable to have these concerns, Barry.
Oh, you know, oh gosh, Janet, I had a year where my allies, my work allies, they died in young ages. 53 was Joel. That was a major loss. But people who went into my business, they didn't live long. I shouldn't be alive. It's kind of spooky. It really is.
Well, these are the times we're living in, and I think that some people find this to be kind of scary, and they use this understanding of the big brother to kind of keep themselves kind of hidden under the table or under the bed, so to speak. But personally, I think that we know what's right and wrong. We're attempting to do what's right by reporting the kinds of
Oh,
abuses and
journalism's
problems.
out the tube. I mean, real journalism is really, I don't know any source that allows real journalism, a major source, anyways. Look, let's go through the USA Patriot Act. It was rescinded earlier this year, but was replaced by the Freedom Act. What's the
Well,
difference?
actually, it wasn't rescinded so much as I believe it expired. It had a sunset clause,
All
and
right,
then
it expired and was replaced by the Freedom Act. What's the difference?
well, that's a very good question. The those in the legislature tried to convince us that the Freedom Act actually um, revoked a lot of the problems, with surveillance and so forth. But in fact, it really didn't. It basically reinstituted a number of the surveillance programs that were embedded in Section 215 of the USA Patriot Act, which was the surveillance capabilities section. So, what we're coming to see, and I really would like to impress this on the listening audience, um, that we have a lot of smoke and mirrors going on. So, when they say, okay, we're passing the USA Freedom Act and this is going to protect you from surveillance, one needs to really scrutinize the act because very often what they say is the opposite of what's happening. So the Section 215 of the USA Patriot Act, which was the surveillance capabilities part of the Patriot Act, expired, and within
Authorizing roving wiretaps.
Mhm.
Uh, all right, I'm reading your material.
Mhm.
In other words, it's not a better act for freedom lovers.
Meet the old, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Right. So the
All
NS,
right,
interestingly
folks.
enough, wait, I want to say this: the NSA uh, went on the record saying that they supported the Freedom Act because it would end this bulk collection of telephone
Well,
metadata.
isn't that good?
Hooey, hooey, hooey.
Hooey.
Oh, yeah, nonsense.
In other words, it will not end the collect. All right, folks, we'll be back in 3 minutes. Another good discussion. Really, my little group of guests and I are getting along more and more every week. I'll see you back in 3. Janet, don't go away.
Thank you, Barry.
See you in 3, folks. This is Barry Chamish.
Hear it first on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. and FirstAmendmentRadio.net.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the left behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
Gold and silver is tremendously undervalued. Global demand vastly exceeds mine supply by more than 60% annually. There is little in the financial world more certain than a coming explosion in the prices of gold and silver. The U.S. dollar continues to lose value and respect as the world's reserve currency. Our nation faces challenges on many fronts, and a day doesn't pass without another economist bringing forth warnings of impending economic calamity. There has never been a better time than right now to acquire physical gold and silver. Discount Gold and Silver Trading was founded on the principles of truth and honesty. We believe in providing a quality product, quality service, and most importantly, competitive pricing. We provide all forms of precious metals, including American gold, silver, platinum, and rare investment and circulated coins. Silver bars, rounds, and 90% silver bags are on hand for the silver investor. Gold self-directed IRAs are available. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, that's 1-800-375-4188.
Hello, folks. This is Barry Chamish with a really enjoyable show. And not enjoyable from the point of view, I wasn't meant to do this. I wasn't meant to write the books I write. Well, I went to my country, Israel, and I wrote books when they started murdering people for peace. And they're available at lulu.com, www.lulu.com. You'll see a search box right in Books Chamish. That's my name, by the way. Chamish. And my website, thank you, David, is barrychamish.com. By the way, next week's guest is Robert Morrow, and it's also going to be a good show. Now your turn, Janet. Plug yourself.
Plug yourself. That almost sounds lethal. Yeah, I know you didn't mean it like that. Yeah, I write currently for New Eastern Outlook, and you can find the articles that we're discussing today. You can find them online at that website. New Eastern Outlook is a geopolitical journal that's published out of Moscow, Russia. And,
really?
And we have...
does that ask questions? Why, of all places, Moscow?
Because that's where they started the journal. And frankly, they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. So we have a number of Americans, some of them somewhat expatted themselves, like me, writing for New Eastern Outlook. There are also a number, of course, Russians. The journal appears in two languages, two versions. There's an English language version and a Russian language version. And because of the issues with the rabid censorship going on now with U.S. media, I will say that this publication does not have the problems with reporters reporting certain sorts of activities going on with the U.S. government in the same way that mainstream
All right, how do we
media
get
does.
to it again?
So if you Google New Eastern Outlook, you will get to the front page, and the article that we were just discussing was called The Fundamentals of U.S. Surveillance, What Edward Snowden Never Told Us. And I believe we're going to be discussing one more article today as well. Also, I have a personal website, which is janetphelan.com. And
How do you spell Phelan?
P as in Peter, H as in Helen, E-L-A-N.
All righty. Now, you're in Mexico. Why aren't you fighting from America?
I am in exile from my country.
Why?
Because some circumstances arose back around 2001, 2002, and I became, shall we say, a person of interest. And I apparently got so interesting that I was attacked with a lethal intent by police officers in Long Beach, California. The book that, my book that was published just last year, entitled Exile, goes into...
I've read it, by the way. I want you to know you sent it, and I read it.
Good.
I don't know what to say about it, but it's a good book. I recommend people get it.
Thank you very much, Barry. I know that I'm talking about some fairly extreme things in this book, and in a sense, I think...
Not to me, actually.
Well, good. So the book is entitled Exile. It was published last year, and it is available at thebookpatch.com. And it has just come out in an ebook, which is actually quite a bit cheaper than the hard copy. So if you go to thebookpatch.com and put in Exile, if you're interested, you can read about it and see if you're possibly interested in finding out how America is treating its investigative reporters.
Well, also, this show for 1 week will be archived for all of you to listen to at Liberty Archives, .com. Janet, tell your people we're up for a week. All right, I'm going to go back to our topic before we get too lost. Look, I believe that you asked the NSA about this Great Britain listening post, and what was their response?
They refused to comment. I sent them an email, and when I did not hear back from them, I went ahead and called them and spoke with a public affairs officer. And, the question was, could you comment on the existence of a British listening post at the NSA? And their response was, we're not going to comment on that. I also contacted British intelligence, and they also, basically said, we're not going to comment. So there was no...
Aren't they governmental? That means that taxes pay for them, and
a
they
lot
have
of
to
tax.
be... All right. Is this permitted?
Is it permitted, or
is it permitted?
I think it's all what they can get away with.
No, what you're talking about is a con job here. And it's really not a complicated one. We don't collect it, our friends collect it in the same building and hand over the info to us. That's the con.
That's the con. And actually what this does is it kind of highlights some of the machinations that are going on at the Justice Department in terms of appearances versus reality. And we're seeing this actually manifest in a number of different ways, not only in terms of the Great Britain listening post. There's a lot of attempts to make laws look as if they are protective when they are in fact not. And I think with that sort of entree, maybe you want to move on to the next article about free speech and prior restraint?
Yeah, you know what? I was about to.
Good.
But let's finish this one off before we go to prior restraint and parallel courts. And this is actually good, but I want to end this. What do you mean the U.S. legal system is in free fall? Who let it loose?
I think that those who are really paying close attention to what is happening in the legal sphere, particularly since the events of 2001, I think most people are scratching their heads and are in utter dismay because there are more and more constitutional violations being manifested by judges. We have a former president of the United States, while he was a sitting president, saying that the Constitution was just a bleep, bleep piece of paper. That was George Bush. There more and more people are coming forward with horror stories about what's happening in particular court cases. And the free fall is pretty much evidenced by the disparity between what happens in a court of law versus what the written code mandates. And so when I talk about two systems of justice, I'm talking basically about what is codified in the written code, whether it's statutory or constitutional, versus what a judge is doing in his own courtroom.
You're saying he's breaking the Constitution?
Many times, yes, and that's actually, that is kind of the focus in terms of the First Amendment, free speech. This is the focus of this article, the next article we're going to talk about, which is entitled Free Speech Watch, Prior Restraint Makes a Comeback as U.S. Courts Seek to Squelch Dissent.
All right. Now, I'm going to say that I didn't know exactly what prior restraint was, so I'm guessing lots of listeners don't know what a prior restraint is. So first, give a definition.
Yes. Prior restraint is restraint on speech. It's a freedom of speech restraint that is applied to speech not yet spoken. So it's like it's not, for example, libel laws come into play when somebody says something or writes something and the person goes, oh,
this is what you're thinking.
No, this is, I'm trying to explain. Libel laws are about, law about speech that has already taken place, but prior restraint is when you're not allowed to say that. We don't want you saying anything about this person. In fact, a court can put a gag order on someone saying, we don't want you saying anything about this person. And this is prior restraint, and this is the issue that is dealt with in this new article, which details several cases where prior restraint has
Can you give an example of those cases?
Well, I guess we could start off talking about a woman named Ginny Johnson, who is in Raleigh, North Carolina, and her father went under a guardianship with an attorney, and according to Ginny Johnson, the guardian's actions were certainly questionable. So Ginny Johnson sent some emails out to the guardian and to some others, basically alleging, and this is a quote from the application for the restraining order, saying that the guardian had, quote, mismanaged her father's real property and personal belongings and abused the defendant's father. Now, these are claims that Ginny Johnson may have been making in these emails. And rather than the court delineating the truthfulness or not of these claims, it simply accommodated the guardian and issued a restraining order against Ginny, saying that, and I've got a quote here, Ginny Johnson shall, quote, neither communicate nor have any contact of any kind with or concerning Linda F. Johnson, who is the guardian.
And
So
if she does, what happens to her?
According to the court order, and I am quoting, violation of this order shall be punishable by criminal contempt of court, including the possibility of imprisonment. So, in other words, if Ginny Johnson says anything else bad about the guardian Linda Johnson, who, by the way, is not a relation, Ginny Johnson can go to jail. Now, and this was done without any determination that any of Ginny Johnson's claims were false.
I'm not sure. Again, what did he have over the court to issue this kind of a restraint?
What did Linda Johnson, the guardian,
Yeah.
have? I would say undue influence. I believe that's the legal term. But unfortunately, Barry, this is not a singular incident. We have another woman named Barbara Stone who just recently got out of jail. Barbara Stone is an attorney licensed to practice law in New York. Her mother went under guardianship in Florida, and Barbara was actually consigned to home arrest for the act of taking her mother, who's under the guardianship, taking her out to lunch. Now, I'm not kidding here. This is a case that can be looked up and read about by anyone who is concerned about the oppression.
I'm not sure what the issue is.
Custody interference. When someone is under a guardianship, they're essentially the property of the guardian. Barbara went to see her mother in the nursing home, found her mother not well fed and not, looking very emaciated. So Barbara took her mom to lunch and is facing a potential prison sentence for this. Now, she ended up being moved from house arrest into the prison when she began to file a number of lawsuits against the judge, against the guardian and her attorney, and so forth. And she was also sending out, she started a blog, right, talking about what was happening to her mother and this grave miscarriage of justice, and ended up in physical jail. This is how Barbara got jail. She agreed to stop blogging. This is again prior restraint.
Okay, I'm doing my best here. She's a lawyer.
Yep.
Shouldn't she have had the background to fight this?
It's not necessarily, since we're dealing with what is two systems of law, what we're finding is that the written code is being trumped by what the judges do in their courtroom. So if a judge decides to violate the statutes, violate the Constitution, which in the case of prior restraint, that's exactly what he's doing, he's violating our right to free speech, then the written code doesn't amount to a hill of beans. It's what the judge does in the courtroom that carries the weight. So not only has Barbara Stone, given up her right to free speech to get out of jail, we have another situation that just came to my attention within the last couple of days in California, where another attorney whose mother went under a guardianship was charged with kidnapping her mother because she tried to bring her mother into the courtroom so that she could talk with the judge, right? Because these people under guardianship, they can't even go into the courtroom. It's all done by proxy.
All right, how do we find this case?
Well, this case I have not yet written about, but it is happening in Los Angeles Superior Court, and it's the Tanaka case, Tanaka, and She was charged, Jeannie Tanaka, who has been for many, many years an attorney with the state of California, has basically been found guilty of kidnapping her own mother and is now facing disbarment. So what we appear to have is a very powerful group of people who don't want you saying bad things about those in their cabal. You say bad things about them, they'll get mad, they'll issue restraining orders, they'll cite you with contempt, you'll go to jail. All of this, apparently, I know it sounds like a big conspiracy, but unfortunately the records are basically substantiating what I'm saying. That they are attempting to stop people from protecting their parents under guardianship. They are attempting to stop people from saying that the guardians are doing anything bad when, unfortunately, in many cases they are.
All right, folks, this is an issue I'm unfamiliar with. But Janet, tell people once again how to get to your website. And for those interested, give her a try. Go ahead, Janet.
My website is janetphelan.com, and Phelan is Phelan. My articles currently appear on New Eastern Outlook, which is an electronic journal. We have a lot of really good writers there. We have Tony Cartolucci, we have William Engdahl. We've got some real sharpshooters. So the general focus of New Eastern Outlook is on the politics of the region, which would of course be Asia, Russia, etc. However, with this mounting conflict between Russia and the U.S., there's a growing interest.
Russia and the U.S.?
Yeah.
Over Syria, you mean?
Right. With that conflict, there is an increased interest at the journal concerning...
Actually, I'd be interested. I've been attempting to sort through why would Russia bomb Syria? What did they get out of it? What is this sudden bombing of Syria by Russia?
Well, what I think is that they're attempting to basically bomb ISIS, which the U.S. has apparently been unable to do. Now, there's a lot of concerns about ISIS, as you know. Like,
I wouldn't say that's necessarily the absolute truth here.
Well, they're certainly not trying to bomb Assad.
That's what I'm thinking.
No, well, not Russia. Russia's not trying to bomb Assad. The U.S. maybe. The U.S. maybe. And I think the U.S. has been spectacularly unsuccessful in making a dent in ISIS. So I believe that Russia is attempting to aid its ally, Assad, in...
All right, there is a very opposite opinion to what I've been getting, but what the heck? I'm too confused by life and the world to even offer an educated opinion. Why not?
Well, I would like to say something about this. There's a lot of coverage about this on New Eastern Outlook, and there is a lot of concerns that ISIS is, in a sense, a manufactured in the USA.
Oh, gosh almighty, I have evidence of that.
Right. So
that goes back to Debka being taken off the airwaves for 3 months for claiming that Israel and the United States were running an operation in northern Jordan to fund Assad's, let's say, enemies.
So if indeed Russia is bombing ISIS, then there is concerns in some quarters that what they're doing is disrupting U.S. activity. Because if ISIS is somehow being managed or run by the U.S., and Russia is successful in these raids, then...
Well, I picked up on that when it came out. I recognized that Debka disappearing after giving this report about Israeli officers and American officers training Syrian anti-Assad troops was not a coincidence. I put it together way back in the time.
Well, I think that might sort of explain a lot of the hoopla going on about this now. But I'm not on the front there, and it's really hard.
Well, why did
sitting at a computer to try to figure all this out?
Why did Netanyahu meet with Putin an hour before he bombed Syria?
I don't know. What do you think?
He didn't tell him, no, don't do it?
What do you think?
Of course not. There's a lot of finagling going on, and it's involving the top of the Israeli leadership, and that's what largely concerns me, but we're not being told a damn thing about what is taking place. Not a thing.
I think you got that right.
All right. I'm going to finish with just one issue. Now, don't get me wrong about Jim Fetzer, but you appeared on his show, and he is really well known as a raving anti-Semite. Not a mild one, a raving one. It didn't do me good to say you were on the show after that. You sent it out to your people, come listen to me on Jim Fetzer.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you something.
Explain that one away.
Oh, yeah, I would be happy to.
Go to it.
Yeah, Jim asked me to come on the show to talk about the U.S. water system being used as a potential delivery system for weapons of mass destruction. And actually, I think we did a very good and very strong show about this. I'm concerned about getting my message out, because I think that if the message doesn't come out, we're going to end up with a level of devastation. A level of
show.
Well, we got a lot of listeners.
I'm sure you did, but again, all right, fine.
I don't. Okay, Barry. I don't. There are hosts who I would refuse to go on the air with, because they're simply, their verbal behavior has already proven to me to be simply,
he was a gracious host.
He was a gracious host.
All right.
He facilitated in getting the information out. We did butt heads at one point about.
Oh God. Gosh.
Some issues.
Oh, look, Janet, we had a good interview, and it was a good show. And tell your people we're at libertyarchives.com for a week. And what can I say? We had a good one.
Thank you, Barry. It was a pleasure.
And mine as well. Good night, folks. I'll see you next week. Robert Morrow is my guest. Night, all.
If you'd like to get a copy of this program, you may subscribe at FirstAmendmentRadio.com for only $45 a month, and you'll receive an MP3 CD weekly of all of our programs. As a bonus, we'll send you a password for our audio archives online. That's a $15 value. Or you may request any month of any program on one MP3 CD for a minimum donation of only $25, or any single program on tape, MP3 CD, or CD for only $15. You may do all of this online at FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Just follow the instructions to make a donation or subscribe. You may also adopt an hour of your favorite program. Please don't forget that most of the programs on FirstAmendmentRadio.com are listener-supported. Don't do internet? Then call 559-781-3773 and we'll be honored to help you. Thank you from all of us here at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
And there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. One man, one microphone, one mission, one message. True News, the only newscast reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ. And now for the most powerful hour on radio, here is end-time newsman, Rick Wiles.